Welcome to Asian American Parenting, a podcast from Rooted Ministry and the Sola Network, where the gospel meets Asian American faith, culture, and parenting. Each episode, we explore how to raise the next generation with a strong gospel foundation in Christ while navigating the unique challenges of our cultural identity. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Welcome to Asian American Parenting. I'm your host, Danny Kwan from Rooted Ministry, and I'm here with my co-host, Monica Kim from Sola Network, who's a counselor and biblical counselor and psychologist.
Good to be here.
Yep. And today, we're excited to have our first guest on our podcast. I want to introduce Pastor Jason Min, who's a senior pastor of Citizens Church in Los Angeles. He's also an Ivy League graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and a former owner of an SAT prep academy. Jason, did I miss anything?
No, that's pretty good. I haven't been introduced like that in a long time, but
Yeah.
it's so good to be here.
But we thought with those three diverse kind of backgrounds, you'd be perfect for this episode on faith, academics, and parenting.
Yeah. We're so glad you're here. We look forward to having you here for 2 episodes, this one and the next one. In this first one, from your background and experience, we would love to hear about your observations, your perspectives, and your thoughts about just what you've seen, even as we're talking in that world of faith, academics, and Asian American parents or parenting. In this first session, while we're focusing in on your experiences and observations, in the next one, we'll come back and follow up with hoping to hear more about your pastoral heart for
Sounds great.
the folks.
Or maybe some exhortations for the parents. Yeah. But let's just start off with a couple fun kind of icebreaker questions. As a pastor in the Asian American context, you're a Penn graduate, Ivy League graduate, and has that ever impacted your ministry or like the way people view you? I have a pastor friend who went to Yale, and when he was getting ordained, the Korean pastor said, "You went to Yale. Why are you going into ministry?" And maybe positively, people look at you differently, or negatively, or is there any stories like that or thoughts?
I'm not sure. If I were to guess, though, and just based on um, my conversations with different people, they're always surprised. I don't know if I should be insulted or take it as a compliment. They're always surprised when I tell them when I went to where I went to school, and I think um, maybe there. I think I did a podcast about this before. I think maybe there within our community there can be a perception that sometimes people who couldn't make it in the marketplace go into ministry.
Yeah.
And I think that exists for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And so I think, though I don't feel like I necessarily like made this huge sacrifice to go into ministry, I do think that you realize how much maybe especially second generation Asian Americans are still products of their upbringing, where they see like getting into an Ivy League and the opportunities that come with it as kind of the crown jewel of achievement. And you had the world was your oyster, and wow, you quote unquote gave that up, to pursue this life of ministry. So, in some ways, I think there is kind of a respect that comes with that. I think there's also maybe some, again, for better or for worse, some legitimacy that comes with that, when you speak about certain things, because, I think a lot of times there's also a perception that pastors are kind of disconnected from the real world, disconnected from the things that are happening in the life of their congregations. And again, for me, pastoring a pretty educated congregation that's more middle to upper middle class. I think to know that their pastor has kind of operated in those circles at some point in time, who has networks and friendships and relationships with people who understand kind of the pressures that come in that world, I think is also maybe has been a good thing and a helpful thing for me.
Oh, that's good. And thank you. I thought you were going to say perception that pastors are dumb, but,
There probably is that too a little
yeah,
bit, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I appreciate how you talked about the uh, audience
Mhm.
or the flock or the sheep that you are, uh, shepherding are highly, like the flock is highly educated,
Mhm.
and that's quite common in the Asian American kind of context. I appreciate hearing about that kind of part of the context. So,
Yeah, and I guess
mm,
just to on that note, I think um I keep having to disclaimer this for better or for worse because I still don't know yet what's if if it's positive or negative. I
Mm,
think time will tell, but um, I do think with for a lot of Asian Americans, they grew up in churches where a lot of times kind of the pastor they heard their pastor say you have to kind of give up everything,
yeah.
um,
mhm,
you
mhm,
know, to pursue Jesus. It was like, and I think maybe some come with past trauma or fear that, um, like, as a pastor, I may tell them, I think you should like forego, any aspirations that you have or aspirations for your kids, and you just have to basically live at church
Hmm.
forever. And I think maybe with the crowd that I'm pastoring now, maybe there is a comfort in that, okay, Jason is someone that clearly still cares about these kinds of things, and he's not expecting us to live at church, and he's not going to be the pastor that tells you fail all your classes and just go on missions and serve the church. And so again, I think that you know maybe provide some level of legitimacy and comfort,
Mm,
right.
for our
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That kind of reminds me also of, I guess, this idea of exceptionalism or excellence. And as a Christian, you forego everything.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, as a then someone who doesn't do that, then you have to pursue excellence or highest success
Mhm.
in education or something else.
Mhm.
I just just kind of thought about that, but
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
I did want to ask you another, I guess, icebreaker or a fun question. Drawing from your experience as an Ivy League graduate and a former SAT prep school owner or operator, what would you want Asian American parents to understand about elite universities like the Ivy Leagues? I mean, are there any,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think
thoughts?
one of the reasons our academy did fairly well, even though I was only
Mm.
25 years old when we opened,
Mm. Wow.
was because I used to work in the Penn admissions office,
Hmm.
and
Ah,
so
yeah.
I think that parents were really craving that insight,
Mm.
maybe it's some insider information. And so one of the things, even then, when I used to do different seminars and talk to different parents, that always surprised parents when I talked about this. But I think there is a misconception that um, elite universities are looking for well-rounded students.
Mm.
Um, and because I think that was for a while what parents heard was it's not just about academics. They have to kind of do a little bit of everything. They have to do some sports. They have to be in leadership. They have to do all these things, and that's true to a certain extent. But really, what elite universities are looking for is more a well-rounded class.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is they would rather have a student excel in a few things,
Mhm.
and rather than dabble in a million things,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, they want to be able to say, hey, we have this group of world class musicians. We have this group of world class engineers, rather than we have kind of a whole bunch of people who do a little bit of this and that. And so that's kind of a big misconception. Parents are sometimes scared, like, if we have our kid just go fully into this field, is that going to pigeonhole my child? And I always tell them, no, that's actually not true.
Mm.
The second thing
Mhm.
I think,
Mhm.
especially now, it was true then. I can't imagine how much more true it is now. But especially among Asian American students, at the time, and to no fault of their own, like first generation immigrant parents, all they had was learning from each other. And
Yeah.
so basically they would find out, hey, what did your child do to get into Harvard? And let me just do exactly that. And
Yeah.
so what you get is basically then a whole bunch of Asian American students that look like they were generated by ChatGPT.
Uh-huh.
Like that you said, how do I get my child into Harvard? And so it was interesting to be on the other side reading these applications. You literally could not tell the difference sometimes between,
Mhm.
you know, David Kim 1 and Sarah Park, like they were the same, even in their extracurricular activities and even in the ways that they tried to be different, they were the
Mhm.
same.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Mm.
when I would meet with these students, you realize a lot of these students, they don't even care about all of these things. They're just following a formula. And I don't think people understand how much authenticity does. There are ways that it does come through in the
Mm.
application,
I see. Yeah.
through the essay, things like that. And so, if I could tell parents anything, it's really cultivating genuine passions and genuine pursuits in their kids at a young age, so that when they start doing these things and go deep into it, it really is a reflection of the people that they are.
Mm. That's good. That's good.
Hmm.
So that kind of leads me to now some of the main questions we wanted to ask you. As a former SAT Prep Academy owner and now a pastor, and again, I'm not just asking you to speak on your church because you don't want them to listen and hate you, but just the church in general. Because I know you just, you speak in New York and across the country, and but your background is so unique. Um, how do you see Asian American parents currently viewing the intersection of faith and academics?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't even know that they would view them as connected. I think they would maybe say that they believe that theoretically, but at least from what I see, and this is my own personal experience, I see like a huge compartmentalization between the two.
Mm,
They're completely different things. There is my child's academic life, and then my child's faith life. And so that's one thing I do see. And then the second is I see, at least in our congregation and in some of the folks I interact with, there is a general desire that they see both faith and academics as something you do
mhm,
and something you should do well.
mhm,
So what I hear from a lot of people are like, yeah, I want my kids to excel in school and I want them to have a vibrant relationship with God.
mm,
And it's whether their way of life and their actual habits and routines and the way they structure their family life is aligned with that desire, I'm not sure. But at least what they would say is, yeah, we see faith as kind of another thing that we feel like makes a person a quote unquote good person, just like excelling in school makes a person a good person, however they're defining that. And we want our kids to do both well. Yeah.
Can I ask a little follow-up? Like, I was a
Yeah.
youth pastor for 29 years, you know that, and,
Hmm.
maybe in your church or in your preaching across the country, do you try to speak to the trying to align these two and find a overlap and where the kingdom of God and academics aligns more?
Yeah, I mean, I think my hope and even in the way that I preach, but also even in the types of ministries we have at our church and the different initiatives we launch. One of our four core values, it's so important to us. We made it one of our core values is holistic faith.
Mhm,
And it's this idea that faith isn't just Bible studies and prayer.
mhm.
It's actually an all of life devotion, head, heart, hands, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So there is this full integration. And how are we as a church either perpetuating a different kind of view of faith versus a more holistic, which is why I love what you do, Monica. We try to incorporate a lot of emotional, mental health, things like that, as much as possible, trying to help people to see that faith is actually who we are. It's a paradigm by which we see everything in our lives, academics being one of them. And so, rather than talking specifically about how faith and academics intersect, I think the goal
Mhm.
more that we've been trying to talk about a lot at our church is how does faith intersect with every avenue of our life, academics, career, family, and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about your pastoral heart for folks in light of those um, aspects of faith and academics and parenting in the Asian American context. So, really look forward to hearing much more
Yeah.
on that. And what you're reflecting on or sharing about does remind me of the passages in Ephesians 2:8 to 10,
Mm,
really about how it is by grace we've been saved through faith,
hmm.
and this not of our own doing, so that no one can boast. But then in verse 10 it says, then because of faith,
Yeah.
now we are workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God had
Yes.
prepared beforehand that we
Hmm.
should walk in them. It's
That's
really
good.
hard to, the gospel message is that we are united with Christ when we
Hmm.
are walking by faith, and how it is about that being that in Christ that informs or compels our
Yes.
doing. And how to give them that framework is something that is so important. So I really do appreciate hearing about that. And
Mm.
again, more to come
Yes.
in your pastoral heart for Asian American parents
Mm.
who are really thinking about how do I parent them in the context of faith and academics.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, here's another question I'd love to hear from you about. Do you think that high pressure and high expectations around academics still affect more of the westernized second or third generation Asian American parents? And if so, how?
I think it does. Maybe not in the same way. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to think about how to articulate this, but um, yeah, in many ways, I think second gen, third gen would like to think we've kind of shed the high pressure, high expectations that our parents put on us. And it's a different kind of thing because, I don't see, I can see even from 15 years ago when I was doing the SAT Academy, a marked difference in the youth students growing up in our church versus even the students that I used to teach at the academy. And so I think that pressure and expectation maybe has like the image of like tiger dad, tiger mom just looks
Mhm.
different.
Yeah.
I know now there's been, like, helicopter parents and then snowplow
Yeah.
parents,
Yeah.
and
Predators.
everything
Yeah.
in between, but I think that impulse is still there, around
Mhm.
wanting our kids to succeed and perform and achieve, like, that same DNA is still
Right.
very much present.
Right.
Mm.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new under the sun. Yeah, absolutely.
How
Right.
about then, like cultural values, just, very generally speaking, from the first generation, are they still present in the Asian American church and second gen and third gen parents? Even the idea of the model minority, and how does that play out in parenting today? So some of these cultural values and even the thought of the model minority in now more second and third generation parents.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're still absolutely present, you know,
Mhm.
um, especially in the second gen, because we're kind of a
Mm-hmm.
bridge generation
Yeah.
between the first and the third. And it's an interesting the way that it plays out is different because I think where the model minority myth maybe plays out in so many of our parents bought into that, raised us in such a way to fulfill the model minority myth.
Hmm.
And the problem is many of us did. We many Asian Americans were successful and we did as minorities, you know, we were able to accomplish a lot, and I mean, just even speaking to people that I went to school with, in many ways, we were a product of that, and so, um, in some sense, like our parents maybe came here with a very specific vision of the good life. And now our generation, on the backs of the sacrifice of our parents a lot of times now have to some extent achieved that,
Hmm.
and are seeing the fruits of that, and so I see that especially at our church, some of the parents, they have opportunities that they can give to their kids that their parents could only dream about.
Hmm.
They have resources, they don't suffer from the same language, cultural barriers. And so you're taking all those values about kind of achieving the American dream that was ingrained from our parents into us. And now so many of us are quote unquote living the American dream,
Hmm.
and we have the ability to now do that for our kids. It's gonna do something,
Yeah.
and it's gonna create a certain kind of dynamic. So if anything, I feel like those cultural values are still present, and maybe in some ways you could argue that they're more dangerous because now we actually have greater resources to provide, to pave the way for our kids to really live into the American dream, and our vision of what the good life looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I always say with first gen parents, they sent their kids to church because they didn't have anywhere else to go. But as a longtime youth pastor, seen that shift where second gen parents, they know about like sports and
That's right.
orchestra and hagwons, SAT prep and things like that. And kids are just busier now because their parents have more options than just church of the like first generation just sent them to church. But in the summer, in my youth group, we had over 100 kids used to go to summer missions, but
That's right.
now they don't need to go to summer missions to be busy or fill up their resume, or parents have other options. They know the other options. Yeah.
That's right. No, I mean, that's absolutely the case with our church. They're just so busy. Yeah, it's almost like you're giving people who never maybe had access to some of these
Yeah.
things, like just this huge sum of money
Yeah.
to be like, now you have all of this, and people don't know what to like. You just put them in a buffet, and they don't know
Mm,
like how to control themselves.
Yeah.
Now
yeah.
it's just
Mm.
put them in everything, give them all the opportunities we never got, and so, yeah, I mean, it's and some of that is I see the heart of the pair. I see, the heart behind it.
Yeah.
It's hard to stop a parent from wanting to give their kids all the opportunities that maybe weren't available for them.
Mm.
And I never got to play organized
Yeah.
sports, growing up.
Mhm.
The
Mm.
where I learned everything, music, sports, I feel like so much of it was at church,
Mhm.
like you said, because that was kind of the cultural hub for
Yeah.
us. But now, even my kids, they're
Mhm.
I'm their chauffeur.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
all week long, they're going to one activity to the next, and
Yeah.
so that's for
Yeah.
sure changed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I do want to just acknowledge, as we're all talking about all the opportunities and model minority myth and the various ways in which the second and third generation kind of continues that um, stereotype or engages in it. I do want to acknowledge for us that, for me also, that there's a lot more diversity and in terms
Yeah,
of in the Asian American
absolutely,
context, and that myth also really hard hits those who don't have the opportunities
absolutely,
and who come from, even now, just really hard conditions, and they might be fleeing difficult kind of situations in countries, and so, yeah, that myth is a really hard stereotype for not only those who feel like they have all the opportunities to be able to succeed, but also for those who actually can't. And it is God who gives and who takes away, and not of ourselves. And just want to put that on the table, not just as an acknowledgement as we're talking about this.
yeah.
Um,
No, that's great,
yeah.
and I think it has done a lot of harm to our community, and I don't think people realize that sometimes the perpetuators of the model minority myth are Asian
Or
Americans,
ourselves.
are
Yeah.
ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we do that, and so, like, you see
Hmm.
someone who is in our generation and sometimes who aren't doing as well, and
Yeah.
it's very easy to
Hmm.
judge those people and to
Hmm.
place them in a different, place them in the out group because we
Yeah.
ourselves have bought into the model minority myth.
Yeah. Yeah. This is our just. I know we've got to start wrapping up a little bit of our time today with you, but and you may have answered this actually, I think, in the beginning, but I still wanted to see if there was anything else you'd like to add in terms of your journey across your journey from tutor,
Mhm,
well, Ivy League, graduate,
mhm.
to tutor, to academy owner, and now to a pastor. What shifts have you seen in how Asian American parents view academics and how it does or doesn't connect with their faith? Have you seen any shifts?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, growing up with first gen immigrant parents, and also interacting predominantly with first gen parents at the academy, but now kind of most of my work is obviously with second generation parents. In some ways, I think both see the im- I think both see the importance of academics, and they see the importance of how it opens doors for people, and there's an acknowledgement that this is how the world works in many ways. I think maybe in the first gen, um, I wonder if, especially for those who were Christians, um, I wonder if the connection to faith was, if I pray more
Mm.
and if I go to morning prayer every day, God will help my child, you know, um, do well and get into a great school, and then that child in turn will do something great for the glory of God.
Mhm.
Like, I hear parents say all the time, Jason, really what we really care about is the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so we just want our kids to do well, so that one day they can grow up and do even greater things for God's kingdom, and that
Mhm.
always made me laugh a little bit inside,
Mhm. Mhm.
like we felt like we needed to help God advance his kingdom. And part of that was by sending our kids to really good schools. Anyways, there's a lot more I could say about that. I don't necessarily see that framework in the second gen.
Mhm.
I think that that part is kind of, they've disconnected that a little bit, but at the same time, I still do see second gen, um, still seeing the importance of academics kind
Mhm.
of, in their kids' lives. And yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's really good. And I think in the next episode, Jason, we're glad to have you back because we're going to really talk about your pastoral heart,
Hmm.
and our heart for Asian American parents as far as what we hope for them
Mhm.
um, in raising their kids and how they balance faith and academics. And so I know we're kind of getting to that, and you really shared some really great examples and stories, and I appreciate all you shared. And so we'll break for now until our next episode. And I just want to encourage our audience, may we embrace the hope, enjoy the gospel, and believe that it's powerful, true, and transformative. Thanks for listening to Asian American Parenting, and thank you, Jason, for being our guest for this episode and for our next episode.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. We hope that you have enjoyed this podcast. For more resources, visit the show notes. See you next time.